Melissa now, who's going to talk to us about cover letters, an extremely awkward genre to write in. So take it away, Melissa.
I'm really glad that you're talking about it as a genre, Amy, because it is a genre of writing that takes practice. And I really want to emphasize the amount of practice it takes and that it took me to finally master. So just a moment here, let me get my slideshow visible. Hang on, there we go. Okay, yeah, so I'm here to talk about cover letters. I was on the job market for 5 years, but I got a lot of interviews. So clearly something about my cover letter was compelling to people. So what I'm talking to you today about is sort of the accumulated wisdom of those 5 years and the many, many mentors that I spoke to, the peers that I spoke to in working on this process. So what is a cover letter for? And this is really going to tie into what both Jennifer and THM have had to say. You're introducing yourself to the committee as a scholar, as a potential colleague. So you're telling them, this is what I work on. This is how I teach. This is how I'm going to be your colleague in this department. But the other thing you're doing, as Jennifer very helpfully pointed out, is you're helping the skimmers, because when you're looking at 75, 50-page dossiers, you don't have a lot of time, right? You're still researching and teaching on top of all this. So you need to guide that committee through your package and say, here are the highlights. If you don't have time to read my whole teaching dossier, here's one cool syllabus or one cool assignment. You want to highlight your accomplishments so far and point to the scholar that you will be. And again, that goes back to what THM was saying. You want to say, I'm the kind of person who's going to succeed here, who's going to do more work, and who is going to hopefully get tenure. So what do you want to talk about? Well, your dissertation, and for those people who are out of grad school for a few years, you're going to start to shift into a major project that probably isn't your dissertation or is some adaptation of the dissertation. Your publications, if you have any, and of course, any conference presentations, those future projects that you see yourself working on, service that you have done. And of course, the order will vary depending on whom you are writing for. If I'm writing for an R1, that research obviously goes first. And we just mentioned for Slacks, you want to go more teaching heavy, but don't forget the research. All of those things should be addressed at some point in your letter. Okay, so I've got a list of do's and don'ts, and then my plan is to show you one of my letters, and Amy and Suzanne have very graciously shared some of their letters. So these are real letters that, got real jobs eventually. And we'll talk through sort of where they do this and how they do this. And we'll also, as far as I know, we're going to share these on the Dropbox or in the Google Drive so people can look at them and think of them as templates in some sense. Okay, so what are the do's? Well, first of all, read that job ad, read it carefully. Identify what they're looking for and consider where you correspond to that. Sometimes the ad is for a generalist and they're not very helpful, but often there are big clues. We're looking for someone who works on late Latin literature, right? Okay, well, I'm a Bronze Age archaeologist. Maybe this isn't the job for me. So look carefully and make sure that you have something that can fulfill some of those needs. Tailor that letter. You're going to write a template and you'll rearrange it and use the basic template, but you want to tailor it. You don't want it to seem like, I'm just sending out these letters to anyone and everyone without a consideration of how I would fit. So again, you want to think about, is this a teaching position? Is there a specific research specialty they're asking for? Do you know about this institution? Look at their website, do a little bit of research. How can you contribute there? Departmental websites can be more and less useful though. So be cautious. If you know someone who knows something about that department, talk to them, find out information wherever possible. It's not always easy to do that, but at the very least, look at that website. Even if you're still ABD, write like a colleague, because you are a colleague. So you want to show them, I'm your colleague, I will be your colleague, and I will succeed when I arrive here. Now, here is the hardest part. Be clear and concise. And the way that they were, cover letters were described to me is that they should have roughly the density of a collapsed star. So take out the filler. It's very hard to write this densely, but it's also a good practice as an academic to get into the habit of, showing with good examples to illustrate your points, right? We know how to do that in conference papers and articles. We're doing the same thing in our cover letter. Keep it to 2 pages because committee members are busy, but you're going to notice that my example is 2.5 pages. So I'm already breaking my own rules. Use departmental letterhead where available. So you want, again, to show yourself as a colleague. If you have an affiliation, get that letterhead. Show it to someone with more experience in the job market. Show your supervisor, your WCC mentor. And if you don't have one, I suspect Suzanne will, or Amy will remind us to sign up for one. Show it to fellow applicants as well. Go through these things together. So one of the things that I did is I sat down with 2 colleagues who are also in the job market, and we would have workshops and we would just hack and slash at those letters until they looked good. So again, it's this genre that takes time. So give yourself the time to master it. Work with people who know a lot about it, and work with people who have gotten lots of interviews and jobs, who know what they're doing. Okay, so here are the don'ts. And I don't want to be too negative because this is a new genre of writing for most people who are writing their first cover letters. So again, just look for that wisdom that others already have. So you don't want to assume that everyone reading your letter is a specialist in, for example, fragmentary tragedy, right? They might not even be an ancient Mediterranean scholar. You could be writing to a Department of Languages, for example. So you need to include the so what. If I work on this, why is this important? And I'll show you a good example of how that's done. Don't, though, go into so much detail that you lose that overall narrative. So just like the CV, you're creating a narrative. This is me, the scholar. You know, there's a few, 3 or 4 points that you want to make and you want to continue to focus on. So don't go into too much detail. Don't oversell yourself. You know, don't say, I'm here to revolutionize the study of fragmentary tragedy. People on committees tend to kind of see those statements and think, I'll be the judge of that, right? So you want to sell the things that you have done, but don't try to be someone that you're not. But if you see that room for growth or future work, you can point that out because that's part of showing what you'll do in the position. You want to avoid those emotion words, right? I'm excited, I feel this way. Don't flatter and pander too much. And one of the phrases, and this is one of the hardest things when you move from writing a cover letter for a non-academic job into academia, none of the I am uniquely qualified. And again, part of that, you might be uniquely qualified, but part of that is that the committees want to be the judges of that. So just try to be as sort of straightforward in your language as you can. Don't mess with your formatting, same thing with the CV. Nice 12-point font, should be readable, spaces between paragraphs. Don't mess with your margins too much, but try to keep it sort of simple and straightforward. And don't send it before you've had someone senior look it over first. So your advisor or a mentor, and again, the WCC can help you with that if you don't have access to that kind of figure. So you always want to make sure that you are using that collective wisdom before you proceed. Okay, so I want to point out, you don't need to do it on your own. When you enter the job market, it's big and scary, or it can be, but there are people who want to help you and guide you through it, like the WCC, right? So that's why we're having these events. So come to these kinds of events. Sometimes graduate departments will put on these events, or even offices of career and professional development on your campus. So take advantage of all of those opportunities to glean wisdom, basically. But you always want to get discipline-specific advice for your letters. So make sure you're going back to someone within your own department. There are templates at sites like the Purdue Owl to get you started. I found it most helpful to look at other people's letters. So people in my department who had finished years before me, a couple of years before me, shared their letters, and I could use that as a template. And again, we'll have some templates available for you here too. Do not feel at any point like you have to reinvent the wheel when it comes to writing a cover letter, because reinventing the wheel makes things a little bit more complicated, again, for the committee. And you want to make it as easy as possible for the committee to understand who you are and why you are a good fit. And I apologize for using that sort of dangerous word fit, but I think it still carries a lot of value within different departments. Okay, so now we are going to look at a set of letters to illustrate some of these ideas I've just been mentioning. So we'll start with mine. And this is a letter I wrote in application to a job at a Canadian university. This is a university where research and teaching are almost of equal importance, and the position was to be working directly on Greek drama. So again, let me expand this a bit. There we go. You want that department letterhead where available, and you want to write your letter in that formal sense, in the way that you were taught probably in grade school, right, with the address and the date and all the rest. Address it to the head of the committee if you know the name of the committee head. Typically that's right in the job ad. And then you're going to start with a first paragraph that is, here I am in a nutshell. And I apologize, we won't have time to read through every letter in detail, but these will be shared for you on the Google Drive for you to go back and review. So I'm writing to apply for this position. This is where I saw it advertised. This is what I research and work on. This is one more kind of interesting thing I do. So this is who I am in a nutshell, 3 sentences maximum. Then your next one, depending on where you're applying, but this is to, sort of non-teaching focused institutions, you're going to start with your dissertation research, or again, for scholars who've been on the market for a few years, go into your major project or your adaptation of your dissertation work. You're going to tell them why it's important. Don't forget the so what. And again, especially for the non-specialists, what you've done as part of this research. Have you presented? Have you published? What are some future avenues that you can see this going in? So all of those things can fit into that big paragraph, but you don't want your paragraphs to be too big, right? No one wants to slog through a page of text. You might add in what else you work on, and this is a good spot to tailor to the specific job. So this was a job that was connected to the performance of ancient drama. So this is where I start talking about, these are the things that I have done that are specifically performance related. You can also talk about further interests, although as I'm kind of looking at this might be where I could have skimmed out that extra half a page. So don't be afraid, again, to edit, hack and slash until you get it just right. But again, you can mention further interests, and this is a place to mention other publications if you have them, or conference presentations. Then you're going to want to address who you are as a teacher. So again, this is who I am as a teacher. This is my style of pedagogy. And again, this is where you can tailor more and more depending on the institution, depending on the job ad. Again, I've got 2 pedagogy paragraphs. I could probably have condensed them. I do mention the courses I have taught and what I would teach at this institution, or where I could teach according to the job ad. You should have something about service if you have service on your CV. And again, that you want to tie into who you are as a scholar, how you see yourself within the field. We're going to see a good example of that once we get to Amy's letter as well. And then your final paragraph is just, 2 to 3 sentences, a brief summary. This is who I am. This is where I want to work. But again, this is the place where it tends to get over eager. So try to scale that back, right? You don't want to go too far with that. And you can include here, this is what I've included in my package or in my dossier too. So again, this is that guide to the dossier. Okay, so that's just kind of the basic standard cover letter. So let's move on to Suzanne's, this is an R1 letter. So this is going to be research focused. So it's going to follow almost the same template as the one I just showed you, and that's going to be standard for cover letters. They should follow that same basic template. Again, moving around the order of topics depending on what it is you're applying for. So Suzanne starts, this is my dissertation research. This is who I am, little nutshell. And she tells us right away about her dissertation research, because this was written when Suzanne was ABD, correct, Suzanne? Yeah. Okay, but she also does a very good job of telling us the so what. Why is my research important? Why is this something new and a contribution to the field? And she also, as an ABD, which is very important, gives us a specific timeline for her completion. And that's what a committee's looking at. Am I going to hire you and you might not finish your PhD for a while? That's a problem. So you want to show them this is on schedule. If you have a scheduled defense date, my defense is scheduled for June, 2022. Suzanne also does a very good job of pointing out what she has already contributed to the field, the publications that she's made, and she does a very good job of signposting what she has contributed or what she has placed in the application package. So look here, look there. This is where you can find more details about me as a teacher, me as a scholar. Then she moves on to telling us about herself as a teacher, and she does a very good job of kind of explaining who she is, and again, pinpointing where in the application you can find out more about that. She uses a very good specific example to illustrate the narrative that she is offering of herself as a scholar. So again, just one nice specific example. This is the kind of teacher I am, pardon me. This is what I did, and this is how this illustrates my engagement with my students. And then, sort of as her final little bit, she mentions her digital humanities experience. I don't know, because I haven't been on the job market for a few years now, but when I was interviewing, everyone wanted to know about digital humanities, right? So that's a lovely bonus that says, this is this really interesting, well-rounded, innovative scholar who's also involved in these groundbreaking projects, right? Without saying, I am a groundbreaking scholar. So she's showing us rather than telling us. And then she's included a lovely, tidy little wrap up. So she's got, here are my writing samples, my syllabi, this is what else I have included, and you're going to receive these cover letters from so-and-so and so-and-so. Okay, so nice and tidy, you know where to go in the package for further detail. So that is, as you can see, much more research oriented, but there's still a nice, good section on teaching as well. Okay, so let's move on to Amy's. And Amy's is for a very specific position. It's for the position she has now at Gonzaga. So she is writing to teach at a Jesuit institution. And so this is a superb example of tailoring to a position. I wish I had the job ad because I think I would find all of these points in it. But again, you can see this template is standard. She's got her letterhead. Everything is nice and standardized, easy to find. Her opening paragraph, of course, is Amy in a nutshell. And she also very slyly kind of touches on, this is the kind of colleague I will be too, not just who I am, but who I will be. And you can see this sort of playing out in the rest of the letter. So she talks about her current major projects, plus future directions for her research, and then some of her other research and how it would fit into the institution specifically. So this letter is very tailored, but I think that makes this a very strong letter for this specific job. Obviously, it was successful. We also get a good set of examples of Amy as a teacher, plus a specific example of how she is an innovative teacher with a specific course that she has taught too. And again, at an institution where teaching is very much valued, this is really important to include. Okay, we also get, because we are classicists and many of us are also teaching language, not just Amy the Civ teacher, we get Amy the language teacher too. Again, very important for that institution. Many job ads these days are basically saying, come and save our Greek program or something to that effect. So you want to show that you're the person who can do that. She also throws in some digital humanities too. So again, here's this innovative, exciting scholar who's doing new and innovative things. Her service section is tailored to the institution. And so Amy had worked prior to being at Gonzaga at a Jesuit institution. So here she's showing, this is the experience I have that really is going to apply to this new position. Now, it may not be that you have worked at a SLAC and you're applying to a SLAC, but there will be something in your experience that you can then apply to the job. So you want to look for that. What about me applies to this job? Don't try to fit yourself into a box, but what you have that fits into the box should be highlighted. And then we get sort of a final sense of service. Amy, what she'll be like as a colleague. So again, very important. She's already showing that I am an important member of this field and I will continue to do so. And again, I cannot stress the tailoring here is really precise. So not every letter will be as perfectly tailored, and part of this might be because of Amy's experience at Notre Dame, but you want to really reflect cautiously about what it is about you that does make you an ideal candidate for the job that you're applying for. Okay, so again, it's a very specific genre of writing. Look to others for wisdom. There's lots of wisdom out there and lots of people willing to share their wisdom. So don't ever feel like you're sort of out there on your own trying to figure this out. Show people and get that feedback before you send it out. Thanks.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much, Melissa. And Ted, THM, I'm so sorry. I'm trying to keep your professional THM. Would you, are there things you want to add in here before we open it up to general questions and comments?
Yeah, definitely. So I would say if you follow what Melissa just told you, you can't go wrong. That was really, really excellent advice all around. Um, Something you'll see if you frequent the whatever Famai Woland is being called now, no why Famai or Famai Restitutai or whatever, you'll occasionally see there and elsewhere complaints about the notion of tailoring in general and saying, if this were really equitable, then everyone would have a stock letter and it would go out and everyone would get equal consideration on that, and it wouldn't be who has more time to tailor. So yes, but Slacks, if they get a hire, it might be their only hire for 15 years. The next hires that my department does, which I hope we're doing next year, I believe will be our last for 20 years because we're all junior and well, we're all junior or early mid-career, and we don't expect to grow further. And so when you think about it from the perspective of the search committee, they're trying to hire a 30-year colleague, and it may be the last hire they get to do before they retire. And from that perspective, yeah, tailoring kind of does make sense. And also, it's not your audience is primary for these cover letters is primarily the department, but not exclusively the department. The department has to be able to, when they forward your profile on to the dean's office or the provost or whatever, has to be able to say, this is a person that we want to hire or bring to campus, and here's why. And so in some institutions, it's just an HR churn, but in other institutions, the person in the dean's office, the person in the provost's office will be looking very carefully and might go back to the department and say, well, this person doesn't really seem like they've bought into the Wake Forest values, which the department might think that's kind of bullshit, but they have to work with the dean, they have to get the dean's office sign off, and so that's I think a very important thing to consider when thinking about this sort of critique of tailoring. Another thing to think about that goes back to the idea of describe your research in ways that will make sense not just to scholars of the ancient Mediterranean. The department you're applying to may not be made up of only classicists or even primarily of classicists. That you might be applying for one of three jobs that deal with ancient Mediterranean studies at all in that department. I'll echo Melissa that 2 pages is what you want. It should not be more. It should not be less. That's not disqualifying. Finalists in a recent search we had, one had a 1-page letter and one had a 3-page letter. But again, this is about showing how the discipline works. And one of that is that cover letters are 2 pages long without weird formatting and that sort of thing. You should have, when you're applying for a Slack job, you should again put teaching before research. You should have 1 paragraph for your dissertation, not more than 1. It's a dissertation. It's amazing and exciting, but it does not merit more than 1 paragraph in a 2-page letter. You should have 1 not long paragraph about where you're demonstrating your future research trajectory, what's next after your first big project, what other side interests you have. But again, that should be 1 paragraph. Whereas 2 paragraphs on teaching would not be out of place for a Slack thing, one that's more about your experience, one that's more about your philosophy and practice, that sort of thing. As Melissa said, respond to the specific ad. You can even deploy exact phrases from the ad. That can be a very effective tool, not even just for academic jobs, but a very effective tool for showing the reader, 1, that you've paid attention to what they're looking for, and 2, that you're a good fit for it. So that can be a really handy technique that not everyone will do, so that'll set you apart. When you're talking about teaching, talk about specific courses that they have on the books that you could teach. You'll want to be careful with overlap, because it might be that you say, I would love to teach your Greek tragedy course, and lo and behold, so-and-so in this department owns the Greek tragedy course and will never give it up, and would say, oh, I don't want to hire this person because they won't be happy here if I don't let them teach my tragedy course. But as best as you can get a sense, indicate what specific courses you'd be interested in teaching. Use course names rather than numbers, because people, at least in my experience, only know the numbers of the courses they teach, and maybe not even then. So go by name. If the department doesn't have graduate students, which should be easy to find out, do not talk about teaching graduate students or about teaching graduate courses. That is a problem that I have noticed that people coming from European institutions tend to fall into more than those getting PhDs in American institutions, but just something careful to do. On the other hand, what you can try to do is try to identify service courses, which might be a big myth lecture, might be teaching in the core curriculum, might be a first-year seminar, might be courses to fit the language requirement. See if you can basically find what are the courses that are what keep the department functioning and keep the department in not insolvency basically, and talk about how you would teach them, about your preparation and excitement for teaching them. And then finally, something that you should be thinking about for your cover letter, regardless of whether an equity or diversity statement is required as part of your portfolio, is to talk about equity and diversity. In our most recent search, my department did not require a separate statement. In fact, we required just the cover letter and CV for our application. But one of the things we were looking for is, does this person show their commitment to equity and their ability to mentor students from undergraduate students from diverse backgrounds? And so that's something that if it's in the letter and it's not something they're looking for, it's an added bonus. But increasingly, search committees are going to be going through trainings that are going to be having them think about equity and think about that as part of their criteria.